This content is AI generated for informational purposes only and should not be directly used for clinical decision-making.
Hello, and welcome back to the Neurosurgery Hub podcast. I'm Dr. Eris, Senior Attending Neurosurgeon.
And I'm Dr. Alara, Research Fellow. Today we're looking at a fascinating new study from the journal Acta Neurochirurgica, published in 2026. It's a meta-analysis titled Robot-Assisted versus Frame-Based Stereoelectroencephalography, sEEG, Electrode Implantation in Drug-Resistant Epilepsy, a meta-analysis of accuracy, efficiency, and safety.
This is a timely topic, Ilara. We know that epilepsy affects roughly 65 million people worldwide. In the U.S. alone, we're looking at over 2.8 million adults with active epilepsy. While anti-seizure medications, ASMs, are our first line, about 30 to 40% of these patients remain drug-resistant. For them, surgery is often the only path to seizure freedom.
Exactly. And the success of that surgery hinges entirely on identifying the EZ, the epileptogenic zone. When non-invasive tools like MRI or PET fail to give us a clear map, we have to go inside. sEEG has become the preferred method for many centers, replacing subdural grids because it allows us to reach deep structures like the insula and the cingulate gyri.
I remember when frame-based stereotaxy, or FRS, was the undisputed gold standard. It's what I trained on. It's incredibly precise, but it has its frustrations. You're limited in trajectory planning, the setup takes forever, and there are real ergonomic challenges when you're leaning over the frame for hours.
Which is exactly why this meta-analysis is so important. It looks at the next major evolution, robot-assisted systems, or RAS, like the ROSA or NeuroMate. The authors, Abbas and colleagues, conducted a comprehensive search through September 2025, pulling together 8 retrospective comparative cohort studies involving 758 patients. They wanted to see if the robot actually lives up to the hype regarding accuracy, efficiency, and safety.
Let's start with the big one for any stereotactic surgeon, accuracy. If I'm moving away from my trusted frame, I need to know the robot is just as good. What did the data show?
The results were very clear on this. The study measured 4 types of error: depth error, radial error, entry point error, or EPE, and target point error. In every single category, there was no significant difference between the robot and the frame.
Can you give us the specific numbers? Our residents listening will want the metrics.
Certainly. For depth error, the mean difference was only 0.24 millimeters. Radial error was 0.07 millimeters. When we look at the entry point error, the robot actually trended toward being slightly better, with a mean difference of negative 1.35 millimeters. But the 95% confidence interval crossed 0, so it wasn't statistically significant. Target point error was almost identical, with a mean difference of negative 0.02 millimeters.
So essentially, sub-millimeter accuracy is maintained. That's a relief for those of us worried about hitting a vessel or missing a small hippocampal target. The robot provides the same gold standard spatial accuracy as the frame, but, as the paper notes, it offers greater planning flexibility. You aren't restricted to those rigid orthogonal coordinates.
That flexibility is a huge clinical advantage. The paper mentions that RAS allows for complex, nonlinear trajectories and 3D reconstructions of electrode paths. But where the robot really pulled ahead in this meta-analysis was in efficiency.
Efficiency is the lifeblood of a busy epilepsy center. What was the time difference?
It was significant. Robot-assisted sEEG demonstrated a much shorter overall operation time. We're talking about a mean difference of 32.58 minutes.
Over half an hour saved per case? That's massive when you're doing multiple cases a week.
It gets even more granular. They looked at the operation time per electrode. The robot saved about 6.55 minutes per electrode. If you're implanting 10 or 12 electrodes, which is common for complex mapping, that time really adds up.
I noticed the paper mentions that the pre-implantation time was comparable, a mean difference of only negative 1.46 minutes. That suggests the time savings aren't happening in the prep or the software planning, but in the actual physical execution in the OR. The robotic arm moves to the trajectory much faster than we can manually adjust a frame.
Exactly. And interestingly, the number of electrodes per patient was comparable between the two groups, about 0.86 more in the robot group, but again, not a statistically significant difference. So it's not that they were doing simpler cases with the robot, they were just doing the same work faster.
Let's talk about the third pillar, safety. In neurosurgery, speed is great, but not at the cost of complications. What did the meta-analysis find regarding the risks of switching to a robot?
The safety profiles were comparable across the board. The researchers looked at overall complication rates, including hemorrhagic events, neurological deficits, infections, and technical complications. There was no significant difference between the robot-assisted and frame-based groups.
That's a critical point for the practicing surgeons listening. There's often a fear that a robotic system might be more prone to technical glitches or that the lack of manual feel might lead to more hemorrhages. This data suggests that the robot is just as safe as the manual frame-based approach we've used since Talarak introduced sEEG in the 1950s.
Right, and it's worth noting that the study included 758 patients. While they were retrospective cohort studies, the aggregate data provides a robust look at the safety landscape. Whether you are using a ROSA or a NeuroMate, the clinical outcomes regarding safety seem to be equivalent to the frame.
So, to summarize the findings for our residents, no difference in accuracy, both are sub-millimeter. No difference in safety, but the robot is significantly faster, saving over 30 minutes per procedure and over 6 minutes per electrode.
That's the core of it. The authors concluded that while the conceptual foundation of sEEG hasn't changed since the 50s, the integration of robotic assistance represents the major evolution. It overcomes the ergonomic challenges and the lengthy setup and calculations inherent to frame-based stereotaxy.
It's also important for the medical students listening to understand the context. We are moving towards a world where sEEG is progressively replacing subdural grid techniques because it's less invasive and can access those deep brain regions. If the robot makes sEEG more efficient, it likely lowers the barrier for more centers to offer this to drug-resistant patients.
One detail I found interesting in the text was the mention of oblique trajectories. With a frame, you're often fighting the mechanics to get a specific angle. The robot just doesn't have those inherent limitations of restricted trajectory planning. It allows for those oblique paths that might be safer or more direct to the EZ.
I agree. Now, every study has its limits. This was a meta-analysis of retrospective studies. We'd always love to see more prospective, randomized control trials, but in the world of surgical tech, those are hard to come by.
True. But the consistency of the data across these 8 studies is quite compelling. The MD for operation time per electrode had a very tight confidence interval between -8.08 and -5.02 minutes. That's a very consistent finding across different surgical teams and different robotic platforms.
Any final thoughts on the clinical takeaways, Ilara?
I think for a neurosurgery resident or a fellow, the message is clear. Robotic proficiency is becoming a standard skill set. If you can achieve the same accuracy as a frame, but do it more efficiently and with more flexible planning, that's where the field is headed.
Well said. This 2026 paper in Acta Neurochirurgica reinforces that. Robot-assisted sEEG is not just a high-tech toy. It's a tool that significantly reduces operating time without compromising the safety and accuracy that our epilepsy patients depend on.
It's an exciting time to be in the OR.
It certainly is. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining us on the Neurosurgery Hub podcast.
We'll see you in the next episode.